This spring is perfect for those owners out there that are looking to maintain ride quality and still gain one of the biggest drops from a lowering spring that's going to improve the 05 to 14. Lowering springs have a big impact on both the looks and handling of the S197, and these offer one of the largest drops for these cars with a 1.5-inch drop. So the install here is going to take about 4 hours. I'm going to call it a 2 out of 3 wrenches in the difficulty meter. I want to start off by clarifying what years exactly these springs will fit. These were designed specifically for use on the 05 to 10 Mustang Coupes, but they will also fit the 2011 to 14 Coupes as long as they have the Ford Performance upper strut mounts and dampers. These springs will drop the GT about 1.5 inches all the way around the car, and like I said, it doesn't get much lower than this for an S197 from a lowering spring. It may not sound like it, but that is a pretty big drop. Depending on your wheel and tire setup, this drop is going to eliminate a lot of wheel gap that the car has from the factory. It's going to leave the car sitting nice and even a little above the tires. But of course, that can change depending on what size wheels you're running. With a 1.5-inch drop, you can expect a lower center of gravity, which will create more track-like handling capabilities. These springs are really going to reduce squat during acceleration and reduce wheel hop as well. You're also looking at much less body roll during cornering and less nosedive during braking. Now, if you think these springs have too much of a drop, or you really want to hang on to some of those softer ride quality characteristics, there are a ton of other spring offerings that you can always check out. iBox, Steeda, and Ford Performance also offer spring kits that won't drop the car as much. Now, these springs do offer that more aggressive drop, but this doesn't mean that the K-springs won't work on a daily driven car. They'll work just fine. It really all comes down to your personal preference and what you want out of the springs. These springs, since they do offer more of a drop, will tend to give a little bit more of a rough ride quality than some other options. They're going to be stiffer than the factory springs as well, so you notice more road noise. But I wouldn't say that these give a bad ride quality. They're still a progressive spring, and progressive springs concentrate on providing balance at all times in order to improve handling. They're just not as soft as factory. At the same time though, these springs are more forgiving than a spring with a larger drop would be, and much more forgiving than a linear spring. I do want to say that a lot of times when you're shopping for lowering springs, you're also shopping for things like adjustable caster camber plates and a new set of both shocks and struts. In this case, I would say that caster camber plates are required because a 1.5-inch drop is about the limit of where you need a set of adjustable CC plates in order to get the alignment within spec. It's going to be close, so a set of CC plates wouldn't be a bad idea at all. At the end of the day, it never hurts to have caster camber plates, so if you've got the extra cash, I'd say go ahead. As far as shocks and struts, this goes back to the drop too. I'd say that you can get away with the factory shocks and struts in this case due to the more forgiving progressive spring rate. I'd also say that this is the case if you have some components with relatively low mileage. If your shocks and struts have a ton of miles on them, I'd replace them. When it comes to price, these springs are going to be one of the middle of the road options. They're not the most expensive, but they aren't the least expensive either. They cost just under $200. If you're just looking to get your car lower and you aren't concerned with ride quality, there are some other options on the site that cost a little less and they'll get you where you need to be. On the other hand, if you are concerned with keeping a nicer ride quality and getting as low as possible, you're shopping in the right place. So the install here is going to take about 4 hours. I'm going to call it a 2 out of 3 wrenches on the scale. You will need some knowledge to complete the install, so I'd recommend having a knowledgeable helping hand or taking this to a shop for the install, especially since it's always a good idea to get an alignment after the install anyway. This install can be done on jack stands if you don't have access to a lift, but as usual, a lift would be your best bet here. You're going to need a few tools, including a spring compressor, so make sure you have that before you start the install. You're going to need to get down to the spring and strut assembly, so everything like the wheels, brakes, and ABS lines will need to be moved out of the way so you can pull the assemblies out of the car. The spring compressor will help you remove the spring from the strut and install the new front springs, which are compressed and installed the same way. The strut assemblies go back in the same way they came out, and the install is the same for both sides. The rear is nearly the same. You need to disassemble some items to get to the springs, but ultimately, you'll be able to lower the rear axle to the point where the springs will be free. Just like the front, the rear springs installed the same way they were uninstalled. No surprises here. The rubber insulators are transferred over and the new bump stops can be installed. After the new springs are in, you can begin reinstalling the shocks and everything else that you uninstalled, and that's about all it's going to take. Like I mentioned earlier, a fresh alignment after the install isn't a bad idea. Wrapping things up here with this review on the Ford Performance K lowering springs, these will fit the 2005 to 2014 GT. You can check them out more online right here at AmericanMuscle.com.